Alex's side, as Arcanine and Snorlax are the leads that Rajan decides to go with. Arcanine here going to be going for Intimidate, so really good Intimidates from both sides right there.
Oh look, more Arcanines. But it's the key thing with Arcanines coming out is how much value do you get out of your Intimidate. That's what a lot of people have been leading up with the Tapu Koko, but both the Arcanines in this game actually get great value out of their Intimidate because they intimidate the other Arcanine and a physical attacker. That Garchomp on Alex's side is still a threat to the Arcanine. Don't get me wrong, it's still going to do a lot of damage, but at the same time, not as much damage, and whatever he decides to switch in, if that's the case, is going to take less damage because of the Intimidate. Snorlax is certainly an interesting one to get intimidated though, because people have been back and forthing all year about whether Curse or the Belly Drum is better. Now with the matchup, I don't think either of the setup moves are particularly preferable, but I think, he does need to try and carve out an opportunity for at least something to make up for that Intimidate.
Arcanine switching out, gonna go into Mimikyu here, gonna bring out that Disguise, one of the newer Pokemon introduced in Sun and Moon. Snorlax also gonna switch out right here, gonna go into Tapu Fini, gonna go ahead and bring that Misty Surge, gonna bring out the Misty Terrain, and gonna prevent any sort of status from being able to hit the field on any grounded Pokemon. As Garchomp on Alex's side, using this turn to go for a Swords Dance right here, gonna set up its attack stat by 2 stages as Arcanine uses Toxic, but of course the Misty Terrain takes effect and blocks that Toxic.
Well, I think that's one good, one bad from kind of the way that turn panned out. Rajan obviously made a double switch. That's a very risky play to do, but he did get both his Pokemon in safely. The Mimikyu still has Disguise in play, that's super important. And the Tapu Fini didn't take any damage on the way in, which is also rather important. So Arcanine really being neutered, trying to get that Toxic in, that's kind of the bad side of this turn. But the Garchomp getting the Swords Dance for Alex is the good side of that turn. He's now dealt with the Intimidate, he's mitigated that by going up 2 stages, so the drop of 1 nets him a +1 in his attack, and he's going to be able to do a lot of damage. Mimikyu, though, on Rajan's side of the field, probably going to cause a few problems. I think with that fairy typing, play rough is really going to do a lot of damage, and he's just going to have to be a little bit careful of how much he tries to capitalize, of course, on that Swords Dance.
Arcanine switching out here, gonna go into Tapu Koko, gonna go ahead and activate Electric Surge here, and gonna change the terrains up a little bit, gonna bring out the Electric Terrain as Tapu Fini using this turn to protect, not gonna want to take a possible Tectonic Rage from that Garchomp. It is gonna be able to go through that Protect though, but just doing a little bit of damage, about a quarter of what it normally would have done. So right now is a good position for the Mimikyu to be able to set up a Trick Room, kind of deal with this just a little bit better.
Well, I think this Tectonic Rage is certainly interesting. He has the Swords Dance, and maybe he feels his time with the potential to use Garchomp is certainly limited. There's a number of people after the Swords Dance, they Tectonic Rage the turn immediately after because they want to get some value out of use of that move.
Yep, and Mimikyu here using Trick Room, gonna set it up, and again, good position right now for Rajan. So Rajan is doing exceptionally well, staring down the face of this Garchomp with a Swords Dance under its belt.
Yeah, he's really just not gone on the offensive yet, but he's managed to set himself up. The Tapu Koko and the Garchomp on Alex's side are 2 of the fastest Pokemon in the format. They're really, really quick, Tapu Koko in particular. Yes, Tapu Fini doesn't have a great matchup against the Tapu Koko and is probably still going to be forced to switch out, but Alex has already used his Z move. He wants to get control of the terrain for later, so it's definitely a worthwhile switch overall.
Tapu Fini's forced to switch out here, not going to want to get KO'd just yet. Rajan using this turn to send in Snorlax here, as Alex actually going to be forced to switch out that Swords Dance Garchomp in a Celesteal, kind of trying to get around that possible play rough from the Mimikyu, but instead, alright, well, that is a Twinkle Tackle coming out from the Mimikyu here. Gonna hit into that Garchomp slot.
This could be a really big switch from Alex. If he's managed to predict a fairy type attack, in this case the big Twinkle Tackle coming out from that Mimikyu, could be a really important switch. It is going towards what was the Garchomp, is now the Celesteela. So this is going to be another Z move that's not getting full value out of it. It does do a decent chunk of damage, but I'd say not really enough for a move of that importance, which the Z move is.
It went from being a KO on that Garchomp into just a little bit of chip damage on that Celesteela. Tapu Koko using this turn to use Volt Switch here and switching out and trying to regain some momentum on Alex's side. Gonna come back in with Arcanine and go for an Intimidate onto both Mimikyu and the Snorlax. So a good Intimidate again for Alex. This Arcanine, this Intimidate's paying off pretty well. Every single time it's hitting 2 physical attackers.
Yeah, and that's something when we look at Rajan's team actually, that he's only really got Tapu Fini as a special attacker. So Alex is guaranteed to get great value out of this Intimidate every single time. I think that's very important in his team decision that he gets to bring it. But Celesteela and Arcanine together against Mimikyu Snorlax, I understand the Trick Room's in play, but I still feel getting that reliable damage out, particularly towards that Celesteela, is going to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. And boy, this is already a revolving door of Pokemon. So many Pokemon have switched out so far, and
Rajan's been making a lot of switches, and I think that's something he needs to do to establish board position. But Alex has also made a number of switches around the same turn, so he's never really fallen behind. The Arcanine is just going to keep coming in and out while he has all four of his Pokemon. He's completely free to do that. And with the type synergy across his team, those switches become a lot easier. Rajan, if you look at him in the bottom left-hand corner there, definitely looks a little perturbed by what Alex has been doing with him.
Arcanine switches out for that Garchomp on Alex's side. The Mimikyu on Rajan's side switches out for Tapu Fini, as Celesteela is just going to go ahead and do what Celesteela is well known for. Going to go for a Leech Seed here, going to connect on, well, it's going to hit one of the Pokemon on the other side, as Snorlax revealing that it has Stockpile here, going to boost its defense and special defense by 1 stage, so it can actually stockpile just twice more in the rest of this game.
Yeah, that's certainly a nice adaptation from the Snorlax on Rajan's side of the field. Not many people have actually picked up on Stockpile Snorlax this year. It's a very good move in doing both special and physical defense. So you do get a lot of value out of it. A little bit different to Curse, which you get kind of an offensive and a defensive benefit. But it does make me curious as to the moves that he's relying on here. Both his Pokemon on the field right now have taken a pretty decent amount of damage, I think. You know, not quite under half, but around that kind of 30-40% mark. And it does put them in range for easier knockouts, especially when this Trick Room ends. When this Trick Room ends, Alex is really going to be able to, I think, start moving the game along a little bit quicker with things such as that Tapu Koko and potentially that Arcanine. So overall, you know, I think Rajan needs to start capitalizing on this Trick Room a whole lot sooner.
Yeah, and, well, the Snorlax can set up stockpiles, but of course Garchomp on the other side has already revealed that it has Sword Stance, so it can still kind of bypass that Snorlax if it really needs to. Celesteela using this turn to go for a heavy slam here, connecting on top of Fini, doing a lot of damage. And Snorlax here revealing that it has Stockpile and Belly Drum here. So 2 setup moves on the Snorlax. Gonna go ahead and eat its berry here. It is going to be the, well, let's see what berry it is. It's gonna be the Ayapapa berry. So healing back to 50%. And Tapu Fini using Heal Pulse here. Gonna go ahead and set this Snorlax back up to full health. So really cool tech right there from Rajan's side. As Garchomp using this turn to go for an Earthquake here, going to connect onto Tapu Fini. Should be enough to pick up the KO on Tapu Fini. Snorlax is going to be able to hang on thanks to that, well, it's already naturally bulky, but also that stockpile helped out.
Yeah, it really did. And this is something that Rajan's team is clearly going to focus on. With the use of both Belly Drum and Stockpile on Snorlax, I've seen players do it before in that they rely a lot on their Snorlax, but he's really doubling down with 2 setup moves on Snorlax. That is the Pokemon he wants to be dealing damage with, and that's why I talk about how important Trick Room is for him here. Snorlax is the slowest thing on the field, so he needs to be capitalizing on this Trick Room. Yes, he is going to be able to knock something out. You know, the Garchomp would fall to a big frustration or a turn, whichever one of those, depending on which end of the happiness spectrum he is, you know, be able to deal with that. Even Celesteela's at danger of being knocked out. This Arcanine coming in, though, does kind of make the turn a little more telegraphed, I think, from Rajan's side. Go for the Celesteela with the Arcanine. Go for the Garchomp with the Snorlax. But then he needs to be worried about Alex's switches, because, again, Alex knows that Trick Room is going to be winding down. He hasn't got much damage out of the Trick Room if you're Rajan. And while that's winding down, he can then, at the right time, bring in something like that Tapu Koko that we saw earlier. Even the Arcanine and get another Intimidate down, even though it's not going to help too much against this Snorlax. Bring in that Pokemon, and then as soon as Trick Room ends, he's ready to go. He's ready to immediately start attacking and just start picking up these knockouts. It's going to be harder on these Snorlaxes when they've got Stockpile up. But even Arcanine, if you can get a little bit of chip damage down, could be a good time for it.
Celesteela switching out here, does not want to get KO'd by Rajan's Arcanine just yet. Going to preserve that Celesteela for a little bit of a late game push. The Arcanine on Alex's side does get to intimidate the Arcanine and the Snorlax on Rajan's side, but Arcanine going to go ahead and switch out right away. Going to go back into Mimikyu, setting up for a possible Trick Room once the Trick Room here expires. Garchomp protecting here, not going to want to get KO'd as well, as Snorlax using this turn to set up and go for a Recycle. So setting up again, this Snorlax it's ready to go as it finds its Ayapapa berry.
I think that's a very good turn from Rajan, actually, because what he does is he reads that turn very, very well. He knows that the Celesteela is going to be leaving the field, so he also removes his own Arcanine so he can save that for later when Celesteela's forced back in. He gets Mimikyu in on the turn when Trick Room ends, so this turn he can immediately look to set that Trick Room back up, and he's still got Disguise in play. The problem is if you double into the Mimikyu and don't get that knockout, you're still going to lose something to this big Snorlax. Snorlax is in a very good position in that it's probably just going to start taking knockouts. The Leech Seed is also going to start activating the berry, and he's put himself in a great range to try and start using that as quickly as possible.
Garchomp switching out here, so this Mimikyu should be able to get up a Trick Room regardless of what happens. But instead, Mimikyu now using Taunt, gonna target down that Arcanine, make sure that it can't go for another Toxic there, as Snorlax using its turn to go for a Frustration, gonna hit into that Garchomp slot and be able to pick up the easy one-hit KO after that Belly Drum, even with the Intimidate. That's how it goes down.
Another great read from Rajan. That's the only way I can describe that. This is really nice that the Leech Seed activates his berry and brings it back to nearly full health. I think it'll fall just a couple of hit points short. But overall, he reads that turn beautifully. He knows that the Arcanine is going to go for Toxic, and to do that, he's going to need to bring in Tapu Koko. So he lets the Tapu Koko come in, slaps it with a Frustration on the way in, and Mimikyu just very cleverly taunts to deal with that Toxic. That is probably one of the best ways to deal with a Snorlax once it's set up, instead of going for actual damage, going for a percentage of its health damage every single turn with the Toxic, which obviously builds up. But now he's in a really tough position. This Celesteela, again, has the option to try and set up some Leech Seeds, which could be very, very important. But overall, you know, Celesteela really kind of limiting its damage output. One of its most damaging attacks is that Heavy Slam that many of them bring. And Heavy Slam is based on the differential in weight, with Snorlax being, you know, I hate to be rude, a bit of a fat boy.
It's kind of a hefty Pokemon.
It's not going to do that much damage.
Yeah.
You know? It's definitely going to be limited in the damage output it puts out.
Mimikyu now switching out, gonna go into Arcanine, gonna go for yet another Intimidate onto the Arcanine on Alex's side. Also putting himself in a bit better position to deal with the Celesteela on Alex's side as well. Right now, we see Alex withdraw the Celesteela, gonna go back out into Garchomp. Good switch right there, maybe expecting that Arcanine to come back in. Arcanine on Alex's side now using Flare Blitz here, gonna target down that Snorlax, but again, thanks to that stockpile, thanks to that bulk, Snorlax hangs on so well, and Snorlax goes for another Frustration, gonna hit that Arcanine, and that is yet another clean KO.
I think Alex is kind of struggling to deal with this Snorlax right now. He missed that opportunity to Toxic it, and that was probably one of his best ways out against it, especially with this stockpile in play. Yes, Celesteela's going to come back in and try and grind this game out towards the end, but overall, I do think that Snorlax is still in a great position. All Rajan needs to do here is weave in a few more of those, maybe stockpiles, recycles. Another stockpile could be great, maybe a bit greedy, but recycle in particular could be fantastic here. I'll be curious to see how much damage something like the Garchomp does. Like, the Garchomp wants to Earthquake now. That's why it's next to Celesteela. And being able to do that would be lovely. Deal with that Arcanine very, very well. But I think Snorlax isn't too worried about it.
Yeah, and really it comes down to whether or not this Arcanine can stay around long enough to be able to deal with the Celesteela. Of course, it should be able to survive one Earthquake. The Tectonic Rage has already come out from Alex's side. Arcanine using this turn to protect, maybe expecting Celesteela to protect here, but instead Garchomp goes for a Rock Slide, not even Earthquake, as Snorlax avoids the attack. Snorlax using Frustration, gonna hit this Garchomp, doing a lot of damage, and another clean one-hit KO. Garchomp's Rough Skin does activate, but that's gonna be irrelevant because it looks like Arcanine and the Snorlax should be able to easily clean up as the Heavy Slam comes out, hits that Snorlax, does a decent amount of damage even through that stockpile.
Stockpile, but the difference in weight, really not too much damage overall. I do think the Snorlax is still in a great position. It's now Arcanine as well, you know, just facing down the Celesteela, so it shouldn't be too hard for Rajan to round this one out, but it just shows how important that Snorlax was to the 4 Pokemon he bought. Got the Belly Drum set up, which made these Intimidates absolutely useless from Alex's side. And then he also got the stockpile up, which made pretty much any attack not so useful against him. Just seeing how well he played around the Snorlax is really interesting. I'd be curious to know, you know, what rounds out that moveset for it. You know, it just seemed very, very good. You know, obviously we've seen all the moves, but he's given up another offensive move. Most people bring Frustration or Return, and then another offensive move, usually in high horsepower. And then, you know, it's just been interesting to see. He's obviously doing well at this tournament without one of those other offensive options. Even Celesteela isn't going to want to deal with this Snorlax.
Arcanine using Flare Blitz here, going to hit this Celesteela and do a lot of damage. Super effective damage. Arcanine going to do some recoil. It's not going to matter too much because Frustration here from that Snorlax is going to be enough to pick up the KO on that Celesteela. So Rajan Ball taking game 1 over Alex Gomez. Going to go to game 2 here. Alex is going to have to make some adjustments. Definitely one thing that has to be done, deal with that Snorlax a little bit better. But one thing that I'm noticing from this team from Rajan, his team is designed to keep that Snorlax around for as long as possible.
Well, the heal pulse, that was a huge turn. You know, he got so much health back onto the Snorlax within a single turn. After the belly drum, it was basically at full health again, and he'd already taken damage.
Going back to what we mentioned earlier, how he builds with one of the championship point leaders in Nick Navarre. Nick Navarre recently won the Virginia Regional Championships on a team based on defending Snorlax. This is a pretty similar team in the fact that, you know, there's so many tools here to keep that Snorlax around for very long. Stockpile, a lot of players opt for the Curse variant of Snorlax, but the Stockpile variant actually boosts, you know, physical defense and special defense, kind of making it a tougher wall to break.
No, it really, really does. What we see going on with that, you know, is once it gets set up, it was almost unstoppable. And if you go over to Alex's side and consider how he's going to deal with this, maybe he brings his own Snorlax, kind of tries to fight Snorlax with Snorlax. Maybe he even has to be bringing Slowking, you know, because he doesn't want Trick Room to stay and play. And he's kind of forced to reverse it. But I think any of those could be kind of a suboptimal use of his team. We look at the team in Team Preview here, and you've got the kind of the top 4 that he bought last game seem to work very well together. They're established and they do their job. And I feel like these bottom 2, these kind of Trick Romancers, are something he's going to have to look at now, but something he doesn't look at in every single game.
Yeah, and of course, bringing Slowking, it could be a big liability considering that, well, one of the first Pokemon that you see on Rajan's side is Tapu Bulu, and Tapu Bulu would not mind facing off against the Slowking at all.
Not at all. I mean, Tapu Bulu, once that Arcanine's removed from play, would probably do a pretty good job here, I'd like to think. You know, be curious to see if he does decide to mix it up and bring the Tapu Bulu or the Metagross. I don't see much of a use for the Metagross right here. You know, with the Garchomp and the Arcanine and the Celesteela, there's nothing that is hitting really super effective with those Steel-type attacks or with the Psychic attacks for those matters. So overall, I think that's definitely going to be left on the bench from Rajan.
Oh, time cut close there.
Yeah, very close to the timer. Rajan definitely considering either a change or just how comfortable he is in sticking with these Pokemon.
All right, here we are. Game 2 between Rajan Ball and Alex Gomez. Alex Gomez needs to win 2 in order to take the round. Rajan just 1 game away from moving on to 5-0. Oh boy, this is an intense battle. Alex will have to make adjustments in order to overcome Rajan's very powerful Snorlax. Tapu Koko and Garchomp are the leads that Alex decides to go with, and Arcanine and Snorlax are the leads that Rajan decides to go with. So the Intimidate going to pay off pretty well. Going to intimidate that Garchomp, so that's going to be big. Garchomp, of course, can always negate that. We've seen the Swords Dance revealed, so...
It can, but I don't know if it really wants to try and spend time doing that, because, well, it becomes a bit of a race to set up here, definitely with Rajan's team. If you see that Garchomp trying to set things up, you're basically allowing Snorlax some turns to set up, and I think Snorlax gets a lot more out of a Belly Drum than you do out of a Swords Dance. It's actually 3 times as much, because it's 6 stages over 2. So it's, you know, 3 times as valuable. Yes, Tapu Koko is on the field this time to try and deal with the Snorlax, but you're also going to have to consider what switches Alex is going to make. You know, the Arcanine's going to be doing a lot of damage on Rajan's side because it's completely unchecked by Intimidate in this time. So if Garchomp's either Swords Dancing to try and negate the Intimidate or switching out even, then we could end up with a very interesting situation.
Arcanine switching out here, going to go into Tapu Fini, going to change the terrain, so interesting switch right there. Not many players would try to switch in their Tapu Fini versus a Tapu Koko, but that's why Rajan's down there, and I'm up here talking about this game instead. Tapu Koko using this turn to go for a Sky Drop here, so this looks like it's going to be a turn for Garchomp to go for a Swords Dance. A very cool combo that's been getting a lot of popularity in the late stages of this metagame. Snorlax using this turn to go for a Stockpile, so now at 1 stage of increased defense and special defense, of course. Garchomp at 1 stage of increased attack after that Swords Dance because of the Intimidate from earlier. And, well, Tapu Koko is going to be bringing it down.
Yeah, well, that's a common combination that we've seen. The Sky Drop and then a Swords Dance on either a Garchomp or a Kartana. Very, very effective. You know, Garchomp does get it, but he only goes up to a boosted single stage of attack. That's in comparison to Snorlax that raised 2 of its stats by 1 stage. So it's now got more value out of that setup turn. As I was saying, it wasn't the Belly Drum. I think Rajan is keen to get that Stockpile in first, so even if, you know, he does get hit by attacks, he's got a little bit of wiggle room. The curious thing for me here, though, is going to be what happens once that Tapu Fini comes to ground. I feel like, you know, we are going to see Rajan have that Tapu Fini come to ground and then get caught by this Garchomp. We did see it go into a Protect last time. Then you leave the door open for Snorlax to potentially set up. And at the same time, you use your Z move very, very early.
Tapu Koko now releasing the Tapu Fini from the Sky Drop as Garchomp using this turn to go for another Swords Dance right here. So now it's at 3 stages of increased attack. That's a lot more threatening than 1 stage as Tapu Fini using Heal Pulse here, but the hit points are full. This isn't even a Belly Drum Snorlax, so Garchomp taking minimal damage right there as Garchomp gets to go ahead and activate its rough skin. So now Tectonic Rage will be able to do a lot of damage, pick up the KO on Tapu Fini easily, or it's going to be pretty close with that Snorlax.
I think Alex made the best of the situation there. Knowing that Garchomp was pretty much free to at least make a move and get away with it pretty much scot-free, the Tapu Fini over-guessing what was going on in that one. You know, the way we saw that one happen was the Tapu Fini actually decides to try and heal up the Snorlax in anticipation of an attack from that Garchomp going towards Snorlax. It doesn't do that, so Tapu Fini actually ends up essentially wasting its turn. What I would have liked to see from Tapu Fini there is actually an attack into the Garchomp. That would have really put the pressure on Alex, but Alex, the right decision, knew what he had to do, get another Swords Dance, and then he went unstoppable.
Forcing Snorlax to switch out, so Mimikyu now going to switch in, maybe expecting the Tectonic Rage to hit there, instead busting the disguise instead of doing a lot of damage. Now Tapu Koko taking Tapu Fini back up into the sky as well. Garchomp using another Swords Dance, 5 stages for increased attack. Gutsy plays from Alex right here, but, you know, it could have been worse. It could have been a Tectonic Rage to just bust the disguise.
I think Alex knows he's got these opportunities to try and do that, while either Snorlax is trying to keep setting on up, while Tapu Fini's throwing heal pulses at it. You know, Mimikyu coming in with the disguise, something Alex was definitely aware of, and fantastic play from him. Now all he needs to do is start getting attacks down. This Tapu Fini will be dropped by Skydrop and will be comfortably knocked out if it is, of course, caught by a Tectonic Rage. At this point, you know, even an Earthquake would do it, but he would easily take his Tapu Koko out with him. He does need to be a little bit considerate, though, of this Mimikyu taking the field. If he goes for that play into the Tapu Fini, then the Mimikyu is going to be entirely free to try and set up this Trick Room, which could, as we saw in Game 1, use of Trick Room swing in Rajan's favor.
Earthquaking his own Tapu Koko right here, knocking out his own Tapu Koko. Sometimes that's the play you have to make here. Picking up the KO on Tapu Fini clean, of course, going to be busting the disguise on this Mimikyu, but that means Mimikyu now will get to, you know, set up. It can easily go for Trick Room or even just straight up go for a Twinkle Tackle to pick up the KO on this Garchomp.
I think it's going to be really important what we see coming out of this
Trick Room
Mimikyu
comes
now.
out.
The Trick Room is the decision that Rajan decides to go for. And overall, with the Pokemon we've seen on his team, I think a lot better. There's no point in bringing his Arcanine right now. And, you know, the Mimikyu doesn't actually have to go for the Twinkle Tackle to get the knockout. That damage that Snorlax put down on it earlier is actually going to be a lot more valuable than you think. But Alex clearly was okay letting that Trick Room go up because he does have a Snorlax of his own.
Well, this might end up being a Snorlax mirror match here because, well, this Garchomp's going to get outsped by both Snorlax and the Mimikyu. So Mimikyu can easily pick up the KO on with that play rough, like you said.
Yeah, of course, there is the potential for Alex to be bringing in his own Arcanine. We haven't seen what that, you know, what's going to be pretty much how he's going to try and negate it. But I do like that the Mimikyu's in play here. That Twinkle Tackle is going to be doing a lot of damage, whatever he goes for. And Rajan Snorlax, again, just seems to have what could be considered an upper hand with the use of both setup moves.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what kind of variant Snorlax that Alex runs as well. It could be the Curse variant, it could be the Belly Drum variant, it could be even what Rajan was using, because I believe that was actually gaining a lot of popularity in Japan in the Japanese metagame. Oh, Snorlax on the Alex side using Belly Drum right here, gonna be able to set up, gonna be able to activate its berry as well, thanks to the Gluttony ability, gonna go ahead and munch away on that berry there. So we're gonna go ahead and see that it is gonna be the Figgy berry, so berry choice. So now Snorlax going for a frustration onto the Snorlax with a critical hit, doing a lot of damage. Mimikyu on Rajan's side using Play Rough here, gonna connect onto the Snorlax on Alex's side, and now Alex gets to go for Tectonic Rage here.
I think that's Rajan not respecting that Garchomp, not kind of thinking about it actually not protecting it. I think he was expecting it to protect. That's why he doubled into that Snorlax. But, you know, he doesn't make that prediction. Alex knows he's probably only got one chance to get an attack out of this Garchomp. In this instance, he does go for that Tectonic Rage. It's going to be a pretty comfortable knockout.
Easily on that Snorlax, just sending it to the core of the planet right there. So, oh boy. Yeah, so Belly Drum on that Snorlax, good information Rajan to have if this goes to a Game 3, possibly. Arcanine going to come in for Rajan's side here, going to go for Intimidate onto, well, Garchomp and Snorlax. Now it's a 5 stages of increased attack on the Snorlax. It's 4 stages of increased attack on the Garchomp. So even though that Intimidate comes out now, it might be a bit late.
I think this Mimikyu needs to be throwing out something. You know, depending actually on what Alex's Snorlax has, it might not be able to attack the Mimikyu. If it's like Rajan's and actually doesn't have anything other than a normal type move, then it won't be able to deal with it. And this Mimikyu could go after the Garchomp, and then it gets slowed down. But it is still going to be able to answer the Arcanine. Undeniably, a real answer to this Arcanine. So a lot of pressure could be on this Mimikyu to deal pretty much all the damage for the rest of this game.
And there's still one more Pokemon in the back for Alex. I'm not sure if that Pokemon has been revealed yet. I don't think so.
It has not been
No.
shown. He's kept it. You know, he showed that Tapu Koko right off the bat. Arcanine probably doing one of the best things it can to try and stick around.
Yep, Arcanine has to stay around the field just in case that Celesteal is in the back. Snorlax using his turn to go for a Recycle, though. Good call right there from Alex. You know, not getting a bit too offensive there and just immediately targeting down that Arcanine. So Snorlax here going to eat, again, a Figgy Berry as the Twinkle Tackle comes out just to make sure it doesn't miss. You know, that's always a smart play.
Yeah, it's probably a turn too late, I think, for this Mimikyu. Wanted to get it down last time before the Tectonic Rage came in. But, you know, showing it off, making sure that he does get the knockout on Garchomp, it is going to be one way to try and open up a door. Alex has made the smart play in going for the Recycle there instead of attacking into the protecting Arcanine.
Oh!
Doesn't go
Snorlax.
after the Garchomp, though. Still not concerned about it.
And that is not even enough to pick up the KO on that Snorlax, as Garchomp now using Earthquake here, going to connect onto every Pokemon on the field except the Arcanine. So Alex's Garchomp staying out on the field for a lot longer than I ever would have expected it to. When you're staring down the face of a really well-boosted Garchomp, you try to knock it out immediately, but right there, Rajan really seeing that Snorlax was the bigger threat.
Yeah, Rajan, definitely interesting decision-making. I'd be curious to talk to him maybe a little bit about it. We do get forced to see Alex's last Pokemon in the Slowking. So maybe, you know, Rajan gets some information that's important there. When he sees Snorlax, he can maybe assume that the Slowking is the last Pokemon that is on that field. But I think Rajan, you know, didn't really deal with the Garchomp quickly enough. Needed to get that Mimikyu in, maybe try and set down something, you know, a little bit more with it, try and get it knocked out with a Twinkle Tackle. But he was so scared of that potential Arcanine switch in, he never went for it.
Yeah, so Rajan right now looks like he's about to lose his first game of the day.
Yeah, it's not a bad player to lose to, though. Of course, Alex Gomez, absolutely fantastic player coming all the way over from Spain to play here at the North American International Championships. But Rajan definitely has a little bit of time to think now, letting that move clock run down, you know, letting that decision-making come back to him. I think overall is probably the way to be playing it.
Yeah, and well, Slowking now revealing some tech moves of its own, going to go for a Heal Pulse onto the Garchomp on Alex's side. So it looks like it is kind of a similar build, come to think of it. I mean, we saw the Heal Pulse from the top of Fini in Game 1. We saw it again this game, although it didn't do anything. But also now Slowking, Water type, also has Heal Pulse, going to be trying to heal back up its partner Pokemon.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see how this team has come together. And that extra turn being played by Rajan is actually very good information to get out of this Slowking. If he wasn't comfortable playing against it and didn't know the full moveset, at least he's got one piece of information about it. That's very, very important.
All right, ready to go here in a Game 3 of
Game
Round
3 is
5.
going to be a belter. Both these players capitalized on Trick Room very, very well. But Rajan there, you know, caught out by that Swords Dance. I think he needs to watch out for that and maybe adapt the lead up a little bit, because that's something that he's done in both these games. The curious play in this one, though, I think, is that Alex's predictions were kind of, or Alex's move choices, rather, were throwing off Rajan's predictions, because he would never expect him to Earthquake his own Pokemon, particularly a Tapu Koko. That's wild.
Well, to be fair, though, you know, Alex's Tapu Koko did do enough. It used Sky Drop twice, allowing Garchomp extra turns in order to be able to set up the Sword Stances that it needed to be able to start sweeping Rajan's team, so...
Oh yeah, the Tapu Koko with the Sky Drop. I think it'd be great if you could weave in those Earthquakes alongside the Sky Drop, get the Tapu Koko and a partner out of the field, then Earthquake the other Pokemon. But that's definitely one of those unique situations that is almost hard to get, I think, with this team. Be curious to see how often he pulls it off, if he pulls it off in Game 3. And I think, you know, Rajan, even though those four look absolutely premium, it would be curious to see if Tapu Bulu warrants a place in this team, with the Slowking and the Snorlax coming, along with Garchomp and Tapu Koko. You know, you've only really got one Pokemon there that is potentially causing you a problem, which is a boosted Snorlax. Tapu Koko doesn't deal, of course, with the Tapu Bulu, especially if it gets control of the terrain. And exactly the same with Garchomp. A lot of those big damage turns for Alex were relying on the move Earthquake, which damages absolutely cut when a grassy terrain is in play.
Yeah, boy. Tough decisions right now for Rajan. Alex has already made his decisions here, so he's ready to go into Game 3. Rajan trying to figure out what mode of his team he wants to go for. You know, the four Pokemon that he brought, the Arcanine, Tapu Fini, Snorlax, and Mimikyu, have done so well. Even in the last game, he had the correct pieces in order to take that game away from Alex, but Alex just played exceptionally well.
No, Alex played that absolutely perfectly. You really learned a lot from Game 1, and I think Rajan probably learns a lot from Game 2. You learn a lot more from a loss than a win in some instances, because when players particularly when they've lost the first game and their back's up against the wall, they then have to pull out something a little bit more secret to try and earn that win. They have to really work for it. And to see him pull out some of these moves and some of these kind of play styles, very, very interesting as Alex completely changing the lead.
Alex now switching it up, going to go with Snorlax and the Slow King here. Rajan leading with Mimikyu and Arcanine, so straight Trick Room mode for Alex.
Well, this is one of my favorite kind of turns that we see in competitive video game. What we do end up with is that mind game. It's absolutely awful to be a part of it. But you have to decide if you want to reverse Trick Room, you have to call your opponent's bluff and not set the Trick Room up for them, or you just let Trick Room go up and try and capitalize on it. This Mimikyu is probably one of the best Pokemon to let Trick Room go up with. It definitely has options for itself to start capitalizing on that. But if the rest of Rajan's team is kind of that faster mode, something like the Tapu Fini, you know, then he probably doesn't want it to go up. We see the Snorlax, so probably theory, let it go up.
Trick Room mode, here we come. Snorlax going to switch out on Alex's side as the Snorlax comes in for Rajan's side. Arcanine going to switch in for that Snorlax that was on Alex's side and going to go for Intimidate onto both Mimikyu and the Snorlax. So, well, that's pretty good, except Snorlax can just belly drum that away. Alright, Mimikyu now using Taunt on the Arcanine was the Snorlax, so preventing Snorlax from being able to set up at all. As Slow King is going to go ahead and do the favor and set up Trick Room.
Well, that taunt going towards the Snorlax on Alex's side of the field, very interesting. Doesn't want it belly drumming, doesn't want it setting up with any other weird things. And, of course, the taunt on the Arcanine actually pays off for him because he can't get Toxic, and he doesn't have to bring Tapu Fini to prevent getting Toxic. So I think that was a really safe taunt from Rajan. The only other option that was coming in, even Celesteela coming in would have been a great target to taunt because then it couldn't Leech Seed.
And if Garchomp came in, you can't set up a Sword Stance.
Yeah, so many things shut down. What's the last Pokemon? Well, Tapu Koko couldn't...
Whatever.
Yeah, Tapu Koko was the only one it wouldn't got any value out of. But, you know, that's just a smart and safe play from Rajan. Now the Slow King set up the Trick Room for him. Rajan actually got his Snorlax in, while Alex took his Snorlax out of the Trick Room because he was so scared of probably the Mimikyu setting up a taunt on it.
Yeah, Snorlax now switching back in. It will be able to set up now, especially since Mimikyu on, well, Rajan's side going to switch out. Arcanine going to come in. It's really a revolving door of Pokemon here. The Intimidate is going to hit that Snorlax, but again, we've already seen the Belly Drum. It's not going to matter. That's just increase it to 6 stages of increased attack anyways. Now, Snorlax on Rajan's side gets to go for a Belly Drum, cutting its HP in half to maximize its attack stat. So now its attack stat has been quadrupled. And the joy of Belly Drum is that it does 50% to yourself, but hey, guess what? You heal back up with your own Aya Papa Berry because of the Gluttony ability, and Alex forced the Trick Room back. When you use Trick Room again, well,
it means you
reverse
made a
it.
mistake.
Yeah.
If you have to reverse your own Trick Room, he's actually, it seems like the pace of this game kind of sits with Rajan now because even though the Trick Room's not in play, the Snorlax actually, with those boosted attack stats, is absolutely insane. It's so difficult to handle. Even without the Trick Room, obviously Slow King might have a bit of an answer to it, but you know, as he starts making these switches, potentially trying to get as many Intimidates out, he's going to need more than 1 or 2 Intimidates to handle this Snorlax. And if Rajan can start targeting frustrations over to Alex's side on the right targets, he's going to be able to start picking up knockouts very comfortably.
Yeah, and Alex switches in the Arcanine to intimidate the Snorlax and the Arcanine on Rajan's side instead of that Slow King, as Arcanine uses Flare Blitz here, going to connect onto Snorlax. And, well, there's the frustration, going to hit that Snorlax on Alex's side and picks up the KO. So now a heavy hitter on Alex's side is now off the field. It's been removed from the game.
Yeah, this is very interesting moves from Rajan. This is one of those things where I talk about how he's kind of a turn ahead. Because he had the Belly Drum, he was able to take those knockouts. We did actually see back in game 2 that while Trick Room was in play, Alex's Snorlax moved first, so it may be even slower than Rajan's Snorlax because, you know, not everyone goes all the way in on minimizing the speed on this Snorlax, so you have kind of a matchup across the board. This Garchomp coming in definitely opens the door for Alex, even with the Pokemon disadvantage in his favor. It's a great answer to this Arcanine, and this Snorlax doesn't have a stockpile, so a double attack from Garchomp and Arcanine could deal a lot. If you don't get the knockout though, Snorlax is free to frustration something back and pick up 1 more knockout.
Or if it even survives Tectonic Rage, it can easily just heal back up with a Recycle as well.
Yes, it needs to get through both, really.
Yeah.
But it could be a really good time for Rajan to just turn on the Afterburners and start taking knockouts. If he's comfortable that he can deal with, potentially, I think Garchomp would be a better target for this one. You know, try and deal with that. Then the Arcanine's going to be in trouble. As we see, though, the
Tapu Bulu.
Tapu Bulu, which I do believe in. it does make Arcanine a little bit more of the threat here.
Yeah, Garchomp using this turn to set up a Swords Dance, so if Rajan goes for a Frustration into that Arcanine slot, this Garchomp is a little bit better off. It's set up as Arcanine on Alex's side using Flare Blitz here, going to connect onto Snorlax, doing a good amount of damage, and that is definitely in range for a Tectonic Rage KO. Snorlax using Frustration, going to target down the Garchomp. Oh boy, Garchomp gets KO'd, so that Swords Dance, boy, what a waste.
Yeah, it's completely gone. And that's a thing I think Rajan learned from that game too, because so many Swords Dance got set up on him, he didn't respect it, didn't deal with it, and then he lost. So in this game, he looks at what happened there, knows that Alex really loves getting a Swords Dance on this Garchomp. I'll just take that turn to knock it out with Frustration.
Oh boy, Alex really has his back against the wall. I mean, the Arcanine does have a good matchup against this Tapu Bulu, but Slowking is the only Pokemon left in the back. It's not going to be able to hit Snorlax that hard.
It's another one of those turns, though, where I think the Snorlax is very important to Rajan. You know, it is, of course, the boosted Pokemon. It is the Pokemon dealing the damage here. And he does need to deal with Arcanine. Now, Slowking and Arcanine together may be able to eke out enough damage. This Snorlax has consumed its berry, hasn't had an opportunity to recycle it yet. So that Snorlax may be able to get knocked out. Probably would need a crit, at least if the Slowking is carrying Scald. The Snorlax could get burned, which would slow the Snorlax's roll a little bit. But overall, you know, I'm definitely curious to see how Alex tries to bring this one back. 4 Pokemon versus 2, though, puts Rajan in a very comfortable position. Picking up the knockouts, using his Snorlax effectively has made this game, given him a lot of breathing room.
Yeah, but Slowking isn't really known as a speed Pokemon. It looks like the match is forfeited, so it looks like Alex Gomez, looking at the board position, says that there is absolutely no way how I can beat this Snorlax. Gonna go ahead and click the forfeit button, and